afternoon to everyone. This is podcast Happy at Work. My name is Tatiana Koval. In our podcast, we meet with experts from absolutely different countries, but all these experts really have passion about people-centric approach in their business. And today they meet with one other person, and I dreamt about this meeting because Clara de Souza, she's one of the founder of EB Space community. For me, this is one of the famous community in the employer branding world. And she's a brilliant specialist, participated in a lot of different podcasts. And for me, it's a great pleasure to see you here, Clara. Hi.
I should be blushing. Really nice to be here.
Clara, I followed you on LinkedIn for, I think, 2 years at least. But I hope all of our audience also they'll do so after our meetings. But before, could you please tell a little bit more about your professional background, your professional experience?
Sure. So day job, I guess by day, I lead employer branding at a big retailer in the UK, which I have great fun with and really enjoy doing. And then I also co-founded, as you mentioned, a space called the EB Space. So we've been doing that for two to 3 years now. And as part of that, we run like a series of events, which we're having a lot of fun with as well. But that's sort of me in a nutshell.
Mhm. Clark, we decided to talk a little bit about EVP longevity and how to implement. For me as a consultant, this is a really big pain. What the company invests a lot of time, a lot of money, and we as a consultant invest a lot of energy to building the EVP. To make up research, to understanding the real situation and build this EVP. And after that, it could go to the shell. Why do you think this situation, maybe not so common in the last years, but it's really could be so for a lot of organizations?
I think a lot of organizations will spend a lot of money on an EVP. And I remember my first encounter of an EVP was a USB stick. I walked into a company, it was sitting on a shelf, and I said, "What's this?" And my then boss said, "It's an EVP." said, "What's an EVP?" And I remember plugging it in and finding all this wealth of information that nobody ever used. And the only expression of the EVP was a little bit on a website, but there was nothing else about it. And over the years, as I've gone into different employer brand roles, I hear the word EVP and projects, and it's critical and you must have them. But the most that you might see out of it sometimes is somebody doing a shiny campaign, a great new website, something that is, but rather than actually changing or making the right promises so that your EVP actually stands true, because it's meant to be about who you are as an employer, what you're offering your employees, how do you communicate that actual proposition. And I think a lot of people will focus on the outputs of it, the stuff you get, the hero campaign, the employer brand that you might build. And that's not to take away from its importance, but the whole purpose of it's a value proposition. So when you think about like a customer value proposition, you're truly explaining the value that you're creating for your customers. So when you're looking at an employee or an employer value proposition, you need to be truly communicating the value for your employees. And I think and ensuring that actually they've got promises, that they've got intent behind it with your leadership team, not just the one director who's sponsoring the creation of this big project. That's intent. And I think that's why it's really important and how you stop having to do repeated EVPs every 3 or 4 years and actually have an EVP that you create, but then you actually start building on that, you start understanding what's working, what's not working. A bit like when you have your listening surveys in your organizations, your culture doesn't change just because you implement a new policy or because you change ways of working. You won't see the effects of that culture change for, a year, really. Like you're looking at your yearly things. And so I think it's understanding how do you bring things together and actually make sure that your EVP becomes something that stands the test of time and that you keep building on, rather than trying to recreate an EVP every few years.
I want to ask you, what are the biggest challenge you faced in your professional life when you work the employer brand for different companies?
I think it's getting people to understand what you do and asking them to care about it. And you can only do that if you speak the language of your stakeholder. So typically, employer brand will sit in recruitment or talent attraction or talent. It could sit in marketing or comms. And all of those areas will have directors who care about it because it's part of that remit of work. But they're not the only people who need to care about it. The people who also need to care about it are your operations directors, your board members, your finance directors, and they're only going to care about something if it's in the language that they understand. So could having a robust employer value proposition and a really good employer brand help you save money or reinvest money because actually you're being much more focused on the resources that you spend? Great. That's what you're talking about with your finance director. Could your EVP and your employer brand help you recruit talent in a much more effective way and actually help the right teams come into the right places and those teams want to stay? Absolutely, that's your operations director. Like you've got to speak in the language that they understand, but often people go, oh, it's just a shiny bit over here, or I don't really care about it, or more often than not, they only care about something when you start recruiting and they realize that they want all of these different things. But you can put a video on anything and say, hey, here's the team. But again, it's like a window. And if you don't keep that going, if you don't keep the dialogue going and you don't keep sharing those stories, and actually is that a real reflection of that team. So I think often it's stakeholder engagement, stakeholder management. I think the other bit that a lot of people will probably relate to is budget. So I've been in more organizations than not where you have to do things on a shoestring. You need to deliver champagne on a beer budget, and it's very difficult to do. But I think the stakeholder management and your budget conversations go hand in hand. If you can demonstrate to a stakeholder why something's really important, they'll find that they've probably got budget in their own area that they can give you to do something because they can see the value of how it works. And I've discovered many times that I'll be told, don't have this budget, but then you're going and doing something for a different business area where they want something, you can give them options and say, well, I can give you this, but if you want this, and they'll go, no, I want the shiny thing, here's the money for it. And actually, it's bringing people into why you're doing it, what's the focus, but then also the vision. So when you go into something, often people go, I'm in a new role, we need a strategy. You shouldn't really be doing a strategy until you're at least 6 months in, because you really need to be listening and hearing what the business are doing, what they're saying, why they're saying it, what are the bugbears. And they don't start coming out the woodwork until you've been in the business for a little while and you're really hearing about things. And yes, you can build a strategy, but a strategy should adapt and it should change and they should be high level things, but they should also include a future vision. Where do you want to get to? How do you want to get there? Why is it really important that you get there? And if you can do all of those things all at the same time, then you're going to have something that other people want to buy into, that other people want to be part of, because you're just demonstrating what good looks like now, and then what it could also look like tomorrow.
Mhm. I have one question for you. It's about absolutely agree what we need to align or what all they do for the strategy of the company, and we need our own strategy for employer brand
Mm.
management. And what could you recommend? Now we are living in a world with a lot of change. And the past, it could make a strategy for 10 years, then
Yeah.
for 5 years. Now we need to see 3 years strategy is okay for business and for you. And then could be something unexpected, like, for
Mhm.
example, but the situation with pandemic and 2020, it was a great example what unexpected change could change everything in our world.
Yeah.
What could you recommend to the people who are responsible for the employer brand? How to build a strategy and how to
Mhm.
adapt strategy, how to find the right balance between a strategic approach, because I absolutely agree what the employer brand needs time for building them alive, for building your EVP alive and as a part of the life experience and like perception. And another balance between the adaptability, they're looking for company strategy, looking for the market situation. So what could you recommend?
There's a few things there. I think the first one would be remove the island effect. So you can go onto LinkedIn, on the magpie effect, I also call it, but you go onto LinkedIn and you'll see people are posting about their great new colleague advocacy program or the new shiny EVP or the new website and all of these things. And you might go into any sort of role going, we need to do all of this stuff. But a lot of people forget why. Why do you need to do it? The strategy that you need to have in your head, and one to ask yourselves really is, do you know your business strategy? Like without needing to look it up, without needing to understand like that the core purpose, do you fundamentally know and understand and can translate your business strategy? So if you know that, then that's your bottom line, really. What you then build on top of it should be built on that business strategy, because your business strategy won't move. Like there'll be fundamental goals that are in there. Any reorganizations, restructures, transformations that happen will happen because of that business strategy. And so your employer brand strategy needs to reflect what that business strategy is ultimately aiming to do. Like if your business strategy, sorry, is about transforming, there's a piece in there around transforming your offering or your talent, then you're looking at, okay, so we're looking at skills, like for the future. We're trying to build an employer brand that allows us to look at skills. So then you might say, right, so this is what we're going to go after. This is how we translate that business purpose and strategy into an employer brand strategy. I think it's then also asking yourself why, for every big project that you're doing, does it fundamentally link to your business purpose and your business strategy? So if you're doing a colleague advocacy program, why is it really important? Like, is it something that your business is fundamentally really going to care about because it's going to drive the ultimate strategy forward? Or is it just something that you go, yeah, we need an advocacy program? Is it? And I think it's asking those questions why not every organization will want the same things. Some organizations may not want a big old website. They might want something that's really stripped back, and that's okay. But you have to reflect like your organizational needs and wants. And you also have to have a mindset where you're able to adapt. So this is a world where it is very transformative, where teams are changing, where businesses are changing very quickly. And I think how you approach that change yourself will ultimately impact how you then approach like your strategy. If you say my strategy is set in stone for the year and this is exactly what we're going to deliver, you're not having that approach that needs to be flexible. So I think, how do you understand like that flexibility, and how do you make sure that there is always wiggle room in that strategy to say, okay, actually we're going to need to realign this, we need to do this one a little bit later, or bring this one forward. And how do you make sure then you resource plan like everything that you might need to make sure things can happen? So if, for example, you have a resource plan that involves a team that's going through transformation, it's probably not going to be able to deliver that project right now. So how do you flex like according to your business needs as well? Goes back to the point I was making earlier. If you speak business language, you're going to get support for your strategy because ultimately you're delivering for what the business needs. So if you ensure that what you're doing delivers that, you're onto a winner. I think the days of employer branders being an island, like being on their own thing, that's changing. I think there's a lot more integration now. You have to connect those links between what you're doing, how that operates with recruitment, how it operates with comms, how it operates with marketing, how you're a subset of these different things, how an employer brand is not a standalone thing, because ultimately a company has its brand, that's it. But an employer brand is a face of that brand. It has a consumer or a business lens as a brand. It's got a PR brand as a lens. It's got an employer brand, but ultimately it's a brand. People don't go and say, this is Shop A, but I only recognize the employer brand. They might experience one part of that brand, maybe from an employer lens, but on the other side, if you're a consumer facing operation, they'll experience the consumer facing operation. But ultimately, any interactions with that brand, no matter what face it is, that's going to challenge their and shape their perception of the company. So actually, you have to make sure that your employer brand is reflective of who you are as an employer, and that's the bit that you're in control of and you can shape and you can influence. But you can't explain or you can't influence someone's experience if they experience your brand in a different way. You're responsible for the window that you're shaping and that you're dressing up, to use an analogy. So my biggest thing would be, go after the things that matter most to your business and be flexible.
Mhm. Claire, my next question for you is about responsibility. Usually, in some companies, I met with a illusion what employer brand is responsibility just of HR or special people in marketing who are responsible for employer brand. And sometimes we have a great challenge to engage leaders on the all levels for our employer branding activities because they have a huge influence on this process. Because if you're doing everything from the side of HR, from the side of employer brand management, but if leaders don't engage, could be a fail for the whole process. Could you please share your experience, maybe some life hacks, some ideas? What could we do for engaging our leaders, for supporting our leaders in this process?
I think you sort of have to share with your leaders that an employer brand is their responsibility as well as yours. Like your job might be to fundamentally shape it and to bring like the vision and the strategy to life. But how you communicate it really comes down to everyone around you. As an example, if I go and see my parents, right, and I'm talking about a place that I'm working, they're building their opinion of the place that I work based on what I'm saying. They're building their influence and their perception. I work for a retailer, so they might shop at the retailer. But if I've had a terrible day at work or a really great day at work, whatever it might be, how my parents think about my place of work, as an example, will be based on what I'm talking about. Like, and you communicate your brand really through those conversations that you have. That's how perceptions are made. It's like the TripAdvisor. You go to a hotel, but people write about their own experiences. So I think in terms of getting people on board, it's explaining how communicating where you work and talking about where you work and that employer brand piece happens in the everyday, in the little tiny moments, and the bits that your leaders can do, the bits that they can influence, little things like you're doing a campaign for them. But if it's, say, for example, you have a professional audience, how do you get them to get their teams to be more active on a company like LinkedIn? Because on a platform even like LinkedIn, because everyone's going to have a network. And it's not just saying you need to go out and do a shiny campaign. It's saying, hey guys, if you're talking about this role and why you like working here and actually sharing your own experiences with a network that's probably got people in who would apply for this job in your team, then you're actually communicating this yourselves. And you start something, you start a spark, because once you start people doing it, they keep on doing it. I've worked with plenty of teams where we've done one thing to encourage them to do it, and then they keep on going. And then we go and review like what they're doing because they start understanding how impactful it is because people are seeing the content or just opinions or things they're putting out there. I think when it comes to influencing like your stakeholders and those conversations you want to have, I think you've got to share with them why it's really important. Like you've got to show them how it benefits them, what it does for them in the future. Like if, for example, you have a hiring manager who's a director and they've had, I don't know, 1,000 applications and it's got to be shortlisted, and then they have to have interviews, the whole time there is spent, and their experience of recruitment, as an example, is that, oh, I've got all of these things to look at, I've got to find time, I've got to do this.
Mm-hmm.
But if you sort of flip the narrative and say, well, what if I didn't give you all of these candidates? I just gave you a short list of people because we've done all this work to discourage people from applying. And you give us like, we make the experience is made better for you. We give you all of these different slots. You pick them in, but we're only going to need 5 interviews from you, right? And that's because we're going to give you 5 really strong candidates that you can pick out of a short list, but it will be much less. Then you make their time more important, you make their experience more important, and you start getting them understanding why this becomes something for them to care about. But I think that the fundamental thing is businesses run on people. Like they run on the people that operate stuff, that deliver things for them. And you want to have people who are motivated at work, right? You want to have people who talk about their experience in a measured way, a neutral way, but it's not like a full-on negative news story. It's actually their days at work. You want people who will stay with you because they've got an amazing skill set, but with that you have to give them the development that they need to do it. And it's making sure that you get that people message coming across. Like if you want to have the best team and that best team drives the best operation and that helps the business commercially, you have to help us get the best people in. And that makes somebody care about it because they're going, well, actually, if I care about creating and helping you create an employer brand that's really strong, and I open up access to the teams and I get involved with this, then ultimately I'm helping myself because actually the right people will want to come and work for me. Even if, you might have an organization that pays less, you become the shining star that people really want to go to. Like I remember a charity some years ago that I loved this charity. They're a really big charity in the UK. They do some stuff in the US as well, but it was my dream to go and work there. Like I'd always wanted to see what it was like to make a difference. But when I got there, my experience didn't quite match up to what I thought it would be. I'd seen one face of the charity, like all the stuff they used to do. And when I got there, I thought, oh, this isn't quite nice. This isn't what I was expecting. And I didn't stay for like that long. I think I was there for about 6 months, if not longer, maybe a bit longer than that. But I didn't want to stay. Like I didn't want to continue there because it didn't live up to those to that expectation. And I hadn't heard from anybody who said this was a great place to work. I just had this one lens and this one perception versus another place that I've worked at where my friend had worked there some years before me, but she said, you'll have such a great time there. You'll love it. It's really great. It'll give you the right stretch. It's really challenging. And I went to work there and I loved it. Like I had a really good time there, but I had that kind of like someone saying to me, this is really good. You'll really like it. I grew my skill set. The difference is that experience, that first-hand experience of talking to somebody about it made a big impact. But also I then went into an organization where I contributed and that's the talent that stays there. So I think it's ensuring that you're talking again, going back to talking in someone's language, explaining why it should mean something to them and why you want them to get involved, not just at the point of recruitment, which is reactive, but actually all year round.
Mhm. Well, I think it's great explanation, and I see what on LinkedIn the people see what they really like what you say. And I have one more questions about, and my next question is about strategy. What I
Hmm.
want to ask you, usually we have different trends, and when we built our strategy, they could the next year they could meet with some important trends, maybe which in the past it's not so important. For example, AI. I think for companies who prepare their strategy 2, 3 years ago, they don't think about AI as a part of their strategy. What
Mm.
could you recommend to the companies who want to implement trends in their strategy? How to see all these trends, how to assess them, how to implement them, and how to rethink about your strategy?
I think it comes with curiosity. So curiosity, not just in with the company that you're in, but also the industry. So the industry that you might be operating in, and also curiosity around talent in general. So actually, there are more hubs and communities and events that I can think of. Publications, podcasts that where people will talk about upcoming trends. But then I think you have to have that natural curiosity to go and learn about them, read about them, talk about them. And once you have that, it's like, okay, you're seeing these things that are coming through. How do you then map that into the industry that you're in? So actually, you've seen these things are coming through. Are any other players in your space doing something differently? What are those trends like in talent attraction that you actually need to start thinking about? So we're hearing a lot about AI generated stuff, content, all these different things. You have the balance as an example between authenticity versus AI generated content. I think I'm probably yet to see really great AI generated content. But you do get some of them that, there are some quite funny ones out there. You're bringing AI into toolkits. You've got AI into interviews. You've got people who are using AI on their CVs, which, in all honesty, I don't think is a bad thing. I think actually it opens up inclusivity and accessibility. But on the other side of it, you then got to prep yourself in terms of, okay, if I think I'm going to get a bunch of CVs that are probably going to read the same because people are using AI, how do you make your interviews better so that actually you're talking to that real person about their experience and you can unpick some of that stuff, knowing that AI is probably going to generate something that's very same, like, that's very similar. So I think it's how you adapt. But I think fundamentally, you need to be curious to understand what's going on. Company A might be doing 100 things to prepare for like the next trends, right? They might have a whole pot of money to invest in. Company B might be doing part of that, but not everything. And if you're company C, the thing is you don't have to do everything, but you have to do what you think is going to impact your organization the most. And I think you've got to be able to make those recommendations, but you also have to be an expert and a conduit to your stakeholders, to your teams, to your boss, because ultimately, people are reached out to all the time, right? So people will try anyone, and if someone's trying to sell something, they'll try every single person they can possibly think of. Or I think one that I always love is when people like on a website, people go, your website's not accessible, and they send it to so many people, and you drive this panic that it comes down to you from various people. Your website's not accessible. It is actually, it's okay, but it's the people are going to reach information themselves in different ways. But how do you get ahead of it? And how do you say, I've got an answer for that, or we're going to explore that, or we might put that on our development roadmap, or we might look at this a bit later on down the line. I think one that's coming up is optimizing websites as an example for AI, because when you look at something on ChatGPT and it references the sources, you're like, oh, I want to see a different source that is actually more credible than that, and I can enable that to happen. But I think you've also got to look at how people process information. Where do they find it? So people will go onto ChatGPT and ask it questions, and it will bring up sources. But it's quite good at, if you're having conversational things. There's another one I think for businesses and stuff that you can use as an AI tool there. There is one that's regular, but are great for resumes. I think it's called resume.io. But there's lots of different tools and things that are being created. I think agents, if I hear AI agents one more time, I could be rich if I had a pound for it. But everyone's enhancing stuff all the time. I think the thing is, how do you remain curious? How do you stay on top of the industry trends that are happening by whether it's listening to one podcast that talks about trends or you read some information? And then how do you ensure that you're translating what everyone's reading into something that goes, we're preparing ourselves for this. We don't need to hit every trend because trends change, but actually we're going to do X, Y, and Z because this will help us for the future. If you're not doing any of that and you're standing still, then frankly everything that you are doing will stand still. But curiosity should be and is part of this role, and part of it is ensuring that you're explaining what's going on within the industry and translating that to your organization.
Thanks a lot. And as you said at the beginning, you need to have a great network. You should be very active. I know what you, as a person who is really very active in global employer branding community. And I want to ask you about next year, 2026. What could you advise to other people what they need to pay attention in their employer branding strategy?
Well, that's a hard question. I think probably less about what to pay attention to. I think obviously AI is a big one, that's huge. But I think it's not just looking at how you utilize AI in what you're doing every day. It's not about saying, oh, you can have AI generated content or you could do this. I think it's how does it help you do things better? How does it help you speed up efficiency? Most people in employer branding have smaller teams. I say most because I do know people who've got much larger teams, but they're bigger organizations. But the majority of people will have smaller teams. So how do you utilize AI to become more effective at what you're doing and how to make yourself even better? Maybe even to become, to take off some of the workload that you might do, but not to distract you from it. So the balance of AI is that they're still not perfect. There are still some things that need to be ironed out with it. And also, if you're saying to candidates with the transparency, we're using AI for X, Y, and Z, how would they feel about it? So I think you've got to balance things in the right way. And I think that comes down to what are those things that you want to go after. Take each project that's on your roadmap or your plan at the moment. How can you weave AI into that project? Or should you, as an example, what are the other trends or things that you might put into that? Skills-based hiring is really, really big, like hot topic. So, but is that something your organization wants or needs? Like, is that something that they want to go after? Is that something that actually, if you started off those conversations, does that open up really good discussions around what that looks for the future? Like you have, skills autonomy and things where it's like, it's not about your experience so much, but it's like the skills that you bring to the table. But you've got to balance that with what do people want? What do people not like? I used to see lots of people saying death to the CV and all these things, but the CV is still around. Like it's, unless you've got a really solid replacement for a CV, people still look at your CV to go, here is my experience, here's what I've done in the past, this validates me to have this conversation with you, etc. So I think it's just understanding what are those things that you think would be worth going after and adopting those into your strategy, and then looking at those trends and going, are any of those trends going to make a fundamental impact to what I'm trying to achieve next year or the year after or within this project that I'm on at the moment? If the answer is yes, then actually rethink that project potentially looks like. And if the answer is no, then carry on.
Well, and my last questions, it's usually ask all my guests on my podcast at the end of our very interesting conversation. It's about three main tips. What could you give to all the people who are working in the sphere of employer brand management? What three main tips could you give to everyone, for newcomers, for professionals? What it should be. But it's the focus of our topic of our meeting is about longevity of EVP. What should they do? Three main steps for making EVP really working and go alive to the company.
So my first one would be, how does your EVP link back to your business? So if you want your EVP to stand the test of time, look at it and look at the outputs against what you're trying to achieve from a business perspective and match the two up. I think that's really important. And if you do that, you'll have an EVP that actually does stand the test of time, that you don't need to go and repeat. My second one would be to network, understand what people are doing in the space. A lot of people think I'm extroverted. I'm actually not really. I remember the first time I went to a networking event. It terrified me. I still, excuse my language, shit a brick every time I'm speaking, even podcasts or on a stage or anything like that. I still get absolutely terrified by it, and my stomach is completely knotted. But when you do it and you go and talk to people and you understand what's going on in the industry, that can really help as well, because you're understanding what good looks like. But also when you talk to people, and this is an industry that I find, is amazing for how open people are to sharing their own experiences. When you talk to people who've been doing it for a really long time, or they've not even started, you'll find that you'll hear things that you're like, oh, I could think of that, or let's do this. So I think in terms of that curiosity bit, which would be my next one, but actually from an EVP perspective, see what others are doing, understand what good looks like, understand what didn't work, and talk to your counterparts of those in your industry. So they're not your enemy, but to see what other companies are doing. And my last one would be the curiosity piece. So actually we are living in a world where there is so much movement, there's a lot of change, there's lots of things happening. So be curious, stay on top of it, link it back to the industry that you operate in, link it back to your company, link it back to your own goals. But I think those three things, purpose, your business purpose, networking, curiosity, won't just help your EVP, it will help every project that you're working on.
Well, thanks a lot for this meeting. Really happy to see you in our podcast, and thanks a lot for all your recommendations. I think they are really, really useful for people, not only for the next year, but I think for the long period of all their career in employer branding. Thanks a lot for participation.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks. This is podcast Happy at Work. My name is Tatiana Cohen. Stay tuned.